to go along than to build the foundation for the technology. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, industry is crazy how much change is happening at the moment. Obviously, a lot of it's kind of enforced or maybe accelerated enforced, but it's amazing. I agree with you.
Yeah, Jan, I'm all open to whatever it is. It's sort of top of mind for you today, and what it is that you'd like to talk about. Love to get the updates on all the things that you're in charge of here. So wherever you'd like to go is good with me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I thought we can talk a little bit about supply chain, but for me, supply chain is really also a huge cross topic. And I usually, when I talk supply chain, I always talk about the business network and the industry cloud and supply chain and sustainability actually in one, because everything is so interconnected. And actually, those are also the areas I'm responsible for, so that makes it easier. And actually, if you think about it, and we had this analyst day a couple of months ago already, and talked about the synchronous planning. I think that is a really interesting concept, but it's also always to be seen in the end-to-end context. And when we talk about resilient supply chains, and the question is why are we talking about it so much? And I think it's because everything is much more connected. As long as you live in isolation, resilience has never been such a big deal. But since everything is connected, and we have, from my perspective, brutally seen that during the pandemic, then all of a sudden this became extremely front of mind. And the other dimension that I feel is really what is always an issue for business is unpredictability.
Yes.
And when we can't really know what's going on or what's happening, that's when the stock markets get nervous and so on. And I think that combination of everything being connected and at the same time unpredictability became so much bigger. Everybody started to focus on resilience and said, even if it costs me more, I got to focus to stabilize my operations. I have to make sure I have a backup. I have much better visibility. I probably want to have more visibility into multiple tiers of my supply chain, because before maybe companies didn't even care much and said, well, my direct suppliers is fine and they will take care of their suppliers, and I trust them. But that has broken down a little bit, especially throughout the pandemic. So I think that has really driven this whole notion of resilient supply chains, and obviously plays pretty well into our narrative around the design to operate process, and how we are trying to connect really our solutions along those end-to-end processes to really support this resilience and give companies visibility on the one hand side, but also, and specifically when you start in the planning, the ability to forecast much better. And forecasting, then you talk about simulation, you talk about prediction, which then, of course, you can do a much better job today because we have much better technology at our disposal. And that is actually something that's super valuable. And then I think, and this is where I always see kind of the game changer that we have in our hand at SAP, that we can always link that into execution. So it's not the planning alone or pulling data from somewhere and running predictive analytics and stuff on it, but really then putting this into action, connecting directly into logistics solutions like transportation management, warehouse management, triggering actions there, or then into production. And that it feeds then into the whole story of Industry 4.0, right? Where you basically have a whole process digitized, and you create digital twins of your products, of your production facilities, of your machines, and they're all intelligent because all the stuff has sensors today. We capture the data from the sensors and feed it again into the context of the business process. So then you talk about those intelligent process chains, and really an intelligent manufacturing process that can be triggered and from the planning process at the very beginning. And that is an iterative thing that is happening all the time. And I think today we can do this much quicker. If you think back and like the traditional material requirements planning runs at SAP, they took huge batch runs. And then once this is triggered, you wait overnight, and then the next day you see, oh, maybe I had to change a parameter and I have to wait another day. And those things today, they happen in real time. And that gives very, very different possibilities then to companies with a direct impact, and obviously on how much inventory they carry. They have the right products in the shelves that where the demand is, revenue optimization, sales optimization, all those things. And I think that is really how we try to tell the story, where the advantage is if you have truly integrated solutions. And that's why I think the synchronized planning topic will be one that will be for us really a very big deal. And we continue to invest there and continue to enhance our solutions in that context. So I stop here for a moment. Maybe if you have any comments or questions.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating story overall. I wanted to go back to something that you said early, right? And how everything is much more connected. Absolutely true. And then you said, but there's also this concern about unpredictability. Yeah. If somebody was taking sort of a side in a debate, if you'd say, does everything being connected help you make things more predictable, or does the interconnection of everything increase the level of unpredictability?
Yeah, I think it increases the level of unpredictability in the first place. And then I think you have to have things like, a platform or business, what we call a business network, which helps to take the, the unpredictability out. Because by default, if you think about, all those peer-to-peer connections, so to speak, very isolated, and nobody has the full picture. But if you get people on the same platform, then they can start to share. They can start to share their data, whether that's inventories or again forecasts or whatever they are willing to share. Then you get more predictability automatically from my perspective, and you also see then disruptions coming much earlier. And I think that we've seen those platforms and business networks for a while now. And that's why we also brought together our various business network initiatives that we had at SAP into this one SAP business network. We also talked about it at Sapphire. And I think that is really, again, a game changer, because we have already so many participants connected to this platform. And it's not only suppliers, then, you also connect to banks, you connect to third-party logistics providers. So really, going above and beyond pure purchasing processes, then into supply chain processes, finance processes, and so on. And I think that is a true differentiator. And the second aspect of that is if you then have participants who run SAP systems on both sides, for instance, as for HANA Cloud, then you can also be much more predictive or much more prescriptive, actually, on how those processes are implemented. And we could, and this is certainly the idea, ship those processes already upfront. So my vision is really that you more or less plug and play, connect into the network. You have the connectivity. That's why we bundled the network connectivity into our RISE offering as well. And then you have a process already set up, a default process, best practice. How does a purchase process work? The purchase order turns automatically into the sales order with your supplier. And then the invoice turns automatically into a goods receipt and on the way back. And that should not be any setup or implementation effort on the customer side. It's not a reality yet, for sure, but I think it has to become a reality. Because why would customers spend money on that if this comes all out of one hand?
Yeah. Jan, is there, you said we're not there yet. So are you talking about quarters, years, 5 years?
I think it's certainly not 5 years. I think in the next couple of quarters, we will see step by step more of those scenarios being rolled out. They exist already. It's often a question on how can we then connect our own pieces better together. And that's almost like the next evolution of our integration efforts. For a long time, we have done a lot of homework, frankly, in the last couple of years, and basically cleaned up our data model so that, a cost center in S4 has the same structure as a cost center in Concur, and then created APIs so that, communication can happen seamlessly. Now with the business network, it's almost the next step. And so now we are connecting all our solutions into the network, and then have to ship then also process content as we do it in S/4HANA Cloud today already, but extend that into the network. So this will, in parts, it exists already, but we will certainly see more and more scenarios. And that's the exciting piece for me. It's really this business layer, that the connectivity itself is all commodity from my perspective. Now, this is really exciting, and but what you can do on top of it, and that's the transactional world. And then of course you generate data, and that's when there's a lot of imagination what to do with this data. And here we're also obviously a little bit bound to the data regulations, data privacy, and you probably know about our Catena X project in Germany with some of the big participants in the automotive world. Obviously, a lot of negotiation. How much data can be shared? How much data do the participants want to share? How to ensure that the access is then only on that data that where you have consensus and so on. So there's more those kind of questions to be solved rather than technical questions. Because technically we could do all this already today.
Yeah, Jan, it's heard more in the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months about business network than I think in the previous 2 or 3 years. And it always seemed to me that until recently, the business network was well understood by a relatively small number of people inside SAP, but it hadn't been clearly articulated or put in the right context for people outside of SAP. But as you describe it here, you start to see, how each of those pieces fit together more and more. And then you said ultimately that leading up to the transactions lead to data, which create the opportunities then to build up to a next layer. That's got to be very exciting, as you start to knock down some of these steps along the way, or the obstacles to getting there.
Yeah, and then I think, first of all, I agree with you, and I believe that maybe even the term has been a problem, because network is always associated with kind of infrastructure, and then people already don't listen anymore. But at the end of the day, I think now we are emphasizing much more on the business part of business network, and that's where it becomes interesting. And then all of a sudden, there's so many scenarios that come to mind. Yeah? So again, if we talk about what we're doing in the industry cloud, for instance, almost all the solutions that we are building now, whether that's intelligent returns management or intelligence claims management, all those things have a network character because you have different parties that need to collaborate. And by the way, Maple Leaf just is about to go live now on the intelligent trade claims management. So that's actually very nice. One of the first big solutions we ship on the industry cloud. And here again, it's about collaboration. Yeah, the retailer with the consumer product company. Everybody has their interest, and of course, they want to then also measure how successful are those trade promotions at the end of the day. And then, on the one hand side, we focus on the transactional part of making sure, the billing and everything happens correctly, and what has been planned has actually happened, and the delta and all those kinds, the claims matching and everything. But then you add another piece to the end-to-end process chain, and you look further upstream and think about, okay, now what about the planning piece then again of the trade promotion? How can I improve that? And then you have to have then again the planning connected with what we're doing in IBP. Think about where's the demand and how do I have to ship a product. Then if I start a promotion at a certain store in a specific region, how can I make sure I have exactly the right amount of product there so I can maximize that? And then it's basically revenue growth optimization. That's how we call it. And this is one of the things we have in the pipe, also in the context of our retail industry cloud. And so you see all those things, they always fit together, and that the network idea is always inherently in there. And what we try to do is then to really connect those things, because like I said, the connectivity should anyway be part then of the value proposition of our products already. And then you can still, when we talk about monetization, monetize on top with additional services, but let people collaborate and connect in the first place and make that part of the core value proposition of the solution, and then you build from there. And frankly, some solutions like transportation management, we have the logistics network. I think over time this will become the next generation of transportation management, because it has to be connected. It has to run on a business network fabric or on a platform.
So, yeah, and that was interesting what you said too about the business network, more focus on the business, maybe less so on the network, not a current or modern type of term. What about, right, and you've emphasized throughout your comments here about the need for end-to-end connection, everything interconnected. So what about, will the, one of the areas that you had up here of supply chain, is supply chain another one of those terms that maybe represents more of the past? Because, right, you're talking about tying supply chain fully in with demand chain and planning and everything else there. That's got to be, right, something that companies, that your customers have to think about their organizations differently, right, and how they try to institutionalize these modern solutions that don't necessarily line up with how they're set up, how they've been set up to do business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And actually, this is a big debate also at SAP, and I said that multiple times. I do believe those product boundaries and those classic categories that are out there in the market, they will disappear more and more. But
Yep.
Human people always need kind of categories to communicate better. I think that is, and until somebody reinvents a new one, we always stick to the old ones. But I'm with you. I mean, neither ERP nor supply chain are still really 100% valid if you look into what is possible now in the cloud as the ultimate platform, so to speak. And we have talked about business process as a service, and this idea that a customer always comes with a business problem that he wants solved. And that could be really a business scenario. It could be an end-to-end process where he's looking for software to support that. And ideally, he would basically really define that and specify that. And we as a vendor would be able to assemble the needed cloud services for him. Yeah? And they work together seamlessly. And so that is kind of the idea. And that can then be multiple products or multiple pieces of product, because modern software is anyway built in modules or in services. And so that's the beauty when you have all those things integrated along those end-to-end chains. And I think if you look back in ERP, in the on-premise world, if we look into the usage data that we have, and it's not as good as what we can measure in the cloud, of course, but we had some possibility to capture. We see that a lot of so all functionality is needed, but is used, but everybody uses different functionalities. So you always pay 100% and you use maybe 50 or 60, but the other 50, 60 are used from somebody else. So we always ship the whole thing. And I think that's where customers come and they say, hey, I need more flexibility. Maybe I don't even use your solution enough, or I don't even know what I'm not using. And then that is where the cloud becomes extremely powerful again. And I think this whole notion of business process as a service, where you can tell a customer exactly what he's using, can advise him where he's missing out and what things he could use on top. And it could also change the whole commercial model. So I think that's where I think those categories will blur more and more, even though the capabilities, of course, don't go away. They're just strung together in a different way.
Well, Jan, it's fascinating hearing this, and just by purely coincidence, when we're finished with this call, I've got a conversation with some people at SAP, Helen Dwight, and just about this idea that I've had of, if you put together a scenario, what will business look like in 2025, right? And of course, going out 2 years, we have to guess, but 5 years or 4 years is a little ambitious. But I was just trying to help put together something that would say, look, these are the things that are going to be possible. Perhaps some of them are quite likely. What do you need to do then as an organization, not just with the technology you have? That might be relatively a simpler part because of all the things SAP is doing. How do you do those things in terms of organization and compensation and talent and flows inside? That is going to be a wild few years.
Oh yeah. I think there is so much change now that has been triggered by COVID, and as soon as and the recovery is starting already, and you see companies starting to really think about transformation in a big way. I think, for instance, sustainability in 5 years from now, I mean, this will be a steering dimension for every company in every industry. You cannot ignore that anymore, and that's why I think companies will have to figure out And I think it's actually going to become a standard like IFRS today in finance. It's going to just be part of an accounting standard as well, and hopefully there will be then a global standard, and then companies have to report on that, and they will be accountable. And the transparency that is required also from customers, that if companies don't show that transparency, they will struggle to stay in business. So this really becomes a matter of staying in business really rather than doing good. And I think if you can combine those things, it's anyway magic. So therefore, I think this will for sure be a big deal. And that's why this is not even, from our perspective, a portfolio of products or something like that. It's really woven into everything. It's woven into ERP, it's woven into our supply chain solutions. And again, of course, you have things like a sustainability control tower who sits on top and has all the data and reports out on the metrics and stuff. So, but I think that, for instance, will be a fundamental change compared to today. But this has always been an afterthought, and it's not really wired into the corporate systems today.
Yeah, and then I've heard from some various people, certainly a lot of SAP customers, about the circular economy. So again, it calls into play. It's not just use less, but how you reuse and pull things back in, where those worlds that used to be separate, new stuff I buy here, old stuff I throw away over here. It is all interconnected, as you've been describing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we have this small customers called Orkla. Actually, they distribute bakery and ice cream ingredients in Europe, and they have started, to implement IBP. And actually, their goal was, of course, first of all, optimizing a planning process, improving the forecast accuracy, of course, but also then to reduce the waste that's related to products past shelf life. For those kind of products they have, obviously the shelf life is rather short, so they have a ton of waste they have to throw away. And so here you see that already in the planning phase, sustainability plays an important role. It's not only, you typically think, in those heavy manufacturing industries, and when you produce a car and you ship it and all the parts, that's where the carbon footprint is created. But talking about circular economy and sustainability along all dimensions, waste is a big piece of it, and so many companies are really actively looking into that. We are working on some circular economy solutions here, which we will release later this year, together with some consumer product companies. I mean, that is a big deal, and they get actually heavy penalties now for if they use plastic, if they use too much packaging, if they throw this away, and so on. So that become actually really nice business cases for them, pretty easy. And it is, again, it happens everywhere. And only if you look end to end, you can tackle the problem holistically.
Yeah, that's is that a generational change in mindset, some way, the end to end, do you think, Jan?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I feel, and it's also maybe a wave, because I've seen the pendulum swing back and forth a couple of times already in the last couple of years. But I do believe now that the expectation, and maybe it has to do with the generation, as you said, because people are used, they have much more power. So one thing is that obviously you transfer your personal experience and how you use software into your workplace, and also then the ability through the cloud to have access to innovation much faster. If you think about years ago, and not much has changed in the corporate software world. So you always had the same stuff basically to work with, and I think now it's things are changing much more, and that's why people expect that things actually work together seamlessly. I remember even, when I think about productivity tools at SAP, we're using Microsoft Office already for 4 years. And the shift to Office 365 was massive from my perspective. All of a sudden, then SharePoint came in, and all of a sudden there's like all those things really fit nicely together, and then now you're so used to it, you're basically annoyed if something doesn't work. And if you think back, like maybe 5 or 6 years, then none of this has worked. It was all offline. So, and I think the same is happening in business software as well. So definitely it has also to do with the generation, but also the underlying technology.
And Jan, in the last couple of minutes, could you talk a little bit about the impact that your teams are seeing with, or the interactions you're having with industry cloud?
Yeah, my team is building most of the solutions for industry cloud. So Peter Meyer is kind of my counterpart on the go-to-market side, and I'm on the product side, of course. In the other areas like procurement and HR, we're also building certain industry cloud capabilities. But the majority is really coming from my teams, because if you think back, traditionally in ERP, we had a lot of those industry solutions baked into ERP. It was one big block of software across all 25 industries. And now moving into the cloud, we are following really the whole modularization strategy. On the one hand side, because we believe the industry boundaries are blurring much more. So you cannot, and back in the days, you had those industry solution for oil, for instance, and you could not then just turn on a piece of the industry solution for utilities, even if you wanted to. It was not possible technically, because it was very interwoven, lots of dependencies. And we said we have to decouple that, and we also have to rethink things then. And every industry has changed so much. Utilities have been, very meter-centric in the past, and now it's very customer-centric, and a lot of new business models, and the actual supply of energy has become the commodity, and they're making money with something else. But the old solution doesn't support that, so we are building this new in a different way on top of the industry cloud, decoupled, standalone, but also always integrated into ERP, because I believe it's always part of the value proposition when you talk, again, also from an industry perspective, end to end. And that's why we had also this rise with for industries packaging now, because you have to bring this together, even though it might be architecturally decoupled, which makes a lot of sense. But still, you wanna tell a customer in a specific industry like retail, what do you get? What do you get when you buy an ERP solution, when you buy S/4HANA from us? What industry capabilities are there? And just because we ship them as an individual cloud service shouldn't matter anyway in the public cloud.
Yeah,
so we're heavily involved there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Jan, I was reflecting back on the point you made. I had not heard somebody say it quite as well as you did, which is, there's certain things that a company might buy. They might need at certain points all the functions, but they only use half of them. And somebody else might use the other half, but not this part, but yet you pay for it all. So it's a wild new world.
It is, and that's interesting for SAP. It's always obviously been a good business model for us in the past, but I think it's also going to be a good one in the future. We just will be more flexible. We are already on the product side for sure. And commercialization, there's other people that can talk about that much better, but my perspective is we will see also much more flexibility. We have to. It's going to evolve, and that's part of the game, and it's good. It's good for the customers.
Well, Jan, thank you for your time. It's been fascinating. I'm grateful for the update, and you pulled a lot of different big ideas together. Thanks for that.
Well, thanks so much for your time as well. Always good to talk to you.
Same here. All right. Cheers.
Take care.